Welcome to Moonnest, where stories drift like stars across the sky. I'm glad you're here. Tonight, we'll wander into a gentle tale spun just for sleep. Let your mind slow, your breath soften, and stay with us. The next story is even more magical. Far beyond the tall, sleeping mountains, beyond rivers that whispered only to the stars, and valleys where the morning mist lay curled like a dozing cat, there rested a village, so high, so hidden, that even the keenest birds often flew below it. This was the village of the cloud sculptors, a place where the air itself was thick with wonder, and every breath tasted faintly of dreams. The houses here were woven from ivy and driftwood, their roofs thatched not with straw, but with the delicate silver moss that only grew at the edge of the sky. The streets, if one could call them that, were winding paths of smooth stone, traced with thin rivulets of water that sang a quiet, endless lullaby. Lanterns, though seldom needed in such a place, glowed with soft, patient light, like the sigh of a firefly caught between waking and sleep. The people of the village, they were a curious folk indeed. Each morning, when the clouds came to kiss the mountaintops, the villagers would rise slowly, stretch their arms toward the mist, and set to work. With tools finer than the down of a newborn bird, they shaped the clouds, coaxing, teasing, sculpting, into creatures and castles, ships and gardens, dreams and stories too soft to be spoken aloud. It was said, by those who believed in such things, that every cloud one saw floating across the vast world below had first been shaped, with care and wonder, in this forgotten place. In the heart of the village stood the grand plaza, a circle of stone worn smooth by centuries of bare, wandering feet. Here, the greatest sculptures were set afloat, sent sailing into the boundless skies. Children, with their small and certain hands, often made the most surprising shapes, a dragon with wings like lace, a teacup that poured silver rain, a bird that sang without a sound. And among all the sculptors, there was one who was quieter, slower, and far more patient than the rest, a boy named Lorien, who preferred to watch the clouds for hours before ever lifting his hands to mold them. Lorien lived in a small house at the village's very edge, where the mountain sloped away into a misty chasm. His roof sagged with moss, and tiny wildflowers grew right out of his window frames, yet he loved it dearly, for it was there that the clouds came first, brushing past his doorstep like shy visitors. He was a boy of few words, slender as a reed, with hair the color of moonlight soaked in milk. His hands, though nimble, rarely hurried. He would sit for hours at the old stone bench outside his home, his gaze following the slow, silent ballet of mist and vapor swirling in the morning air. The others often marveled at how long Lorien waited before shaping anything at all. "He listens to the clouds," the elders would say, smiling behind their beards and woven hats. "He waits until he knows what they wish to become." Indeed, Lorien treated each wisp of cloud like a secret being, one whose story must be understood before it could be told. While others sculpted towers, lions, and gardens of light, Lorien's creations were quieter, stranger, and somehow more alive. A spiral staircase that climbed itself into the sky, a flower that slowly opened into a sleeping face, a boat that sailed not on water, but on the soft breath of the wind. One morning, when the mist hung low and thick, and the village rooftops looked like islands adrift in a ghostly sea, Lorien felt a stirring in the air unlike any he had known before. He sat very still, his hands resting lightly on his knees, and closed his eyes. The mist whispered, though not in words. It sang a song of something waiting, something hidden just beyond the reach of the ordinary sky. Something calling not just to the hands of a sculptor, but to the heart of one who could listen long enough to understand. And so, without rushing, without even thinking, Lorien rose from his bench, gathered his delicate tools, a fine-boned comb, a brush of silken horsehair, and a thin-bladed knife made from the frozen breath of winter itself, and set off down the winding path that led to the grand plaza, the mist parting before him like a curtain drawn back by unseen hands. The day of his true journey was about to begin. The grand plaza was quieter than usual when Lorien arrived. Only a few sculptors were there, their hands moving slowly, shaping the morning mist into delicate wonders. The air felt heavy, not with sadness, but with a strange kind of expectancy, like a breath held too long. Lorien stepped into the center of the plaza, where the oldest stone lay, a slab etched with circles and spirals no one could remember carving. Here, the mist seemed thickest, coiling lazily around his ankles, brushing against his cheeks like the touch of an old friend. He knelt down, resting his tools carefully beside him, and simply listened. The mist murmured, weaving around his fingers, tugging at his sleeves. It spoke not in language, but in feelings, a longing, a memory, a gentle nudge towards something forgotten. Closing his eyes, Lorien let his fingers drift through the cloud stuff, feeling its weight, its warmth, its sorrow. Then, very slowly, he lifted his comb and drew it through the air, teasing out the first fragile shape. It was a key. Not a heavy, iron thing like those that opened doors, but a key of pure mist, delicate and shimmering, with 1,000 tiny whirls that spun quietly in the breeze. As it hovered in the air before him, the mist around the plaza stirred, and the sculptors paused in their work to watch. Then, without a sound, the key floated away, trailing a thin ribbon of silver vapor behind it, winding through the village streets like a curious cat. Lorien, heart beating softly against his ribs, stood and followed. No one spoke. No one stopped him. In the village of cloud sculptors, when a shape chose to move on its own, it was not wise to question, only to follow, with open heart and quiet feet. And so Lorien walked, his shadow long and soft against the stone paths, the silver key leading him onward, into the deepening mist. The key led him past the familiar cottages, their windows winking with sleepy light, and into a part of the village where few tread, a place where the old stones grew uneven, and the ivy hung heavy as drapes. There, tucked behind a leaning archway of forgotten wood, stood a door. Not a house's door, nor a shop's, but a door standing alone, framed by nothing but air and mist. It was simple, old oak, bound in faded bronze, and it hummed, very softly, as though breathing. The mist-woven key floated before the door, trembling like a leaf, and Lorien understood, in the quiet, certain way of dreamers, that he was meant to open it. He reached out, feeling the cool weight of the key in his hand, though it remained as light as mist, and pressed it gently into an unseen lock. The door shivered under his touch, sighed once, and swung inward with a sighing creak. Beyond was not another room, nor a hidden passageway, but a staircase made of cloud, spiraling upward into a sky so soft and pale that it seemed the very air might dissolve underfoot. Without fear, without hurry, Lorien stepped through. Each step was springy and cool, supporting his weight like a promise. The mist closed softly behind him, wrapping the doorway in folds of silver until it vanished from sight. Up and up he climbed, the world falling away below him, the village becoming no more than a scattering of soft lights in a bed of wool. He climbed until he could no longer hear the murmur of the river, nor the creak of the village windmills, nor even the whisper of his own breath. There was only the soft sound of the stairs underfoot, and the occasional sigh of a cloud brushing past his cheeks. And then, at last, he reached the top. There, floating in the endless sky, was a garden. The garden was unlike anything Lorien had ever seen, or perhaps, it was exactly what he had always dreamed of, in the soft, wordless corners of his mind. It stretched outward, not in rows or hedges, but in wild, endless spirals, great, looping vines of mist and light, curling like dancers across a floor of shifting silver. Flowers grew here, too, if one could call them that, blooms of vapor, petals shaped from starlight and the faintest sighs of distant winds. Some shivered gently, as though breathing, others hovered, barely touching the ground, spinning in slow, contented circles. Above, the sky was not truly sky at all, but a deep, endless twilight, soft blues and violets bleeding together, pierced only by a few lonely stars, blinking sleepily from their faraway homes. In the very center of the garden, there stood a tree, though, like everything here, it seemed half real, half dream. Its trunk twisted upward, made of woven air and drifting mist, and its leaves shimmered, delicate as frost on morning grass. Lorien stepped forward, each footfall stirring tiny eddies in the cloud dust beneath him. The tree seemed to notice, for its branches quivered, and from among its leaves, something descended, something small, and shining, and utterly weightless. It was another key. This one was different from the first, shaped like a teardrop, threaded through with fine lines like veins in a leaf. It hovered before Lorien's heart, waiting, humming faintly in a melody only the soul could hear. Lorien held out his hand, and the key settled into his palm, warm and pulsing with a life of its own. The moment he touched it, the garden changed. Slowly, gently, a pathway opened among the swirling vines, a path woven not of stones, but of soft, glimmering clouds, leading deeper into the dreamscape. And though he did not know where it would lead, Lorien knew, with the deep certainty of mist and moonlight, that he must follow. The path wound onward, soft and slow, curving like the body of a sleeping serpent through the silver mist. With each step, the garden grew stranger, quieter, more filled with the hush of unseen things waiting just beyond the edge of thought. Great bells of cloud stuff hung from unseen branches overhead, swaying with no wind, chiming a music that could not be heard with ears alone, a lullaby for the dreaming heart. Small creatures, too, stirred at the edges of the path, not beasts of fur and tooth, but gentle shapes of mist and glimmering dust, flickering in and out of sight like fireflies lost in thought. Some floated lazily, others bounded across the soft ground in slow, playful arcs, leaving trails of shimmering footprints that faded before the next breath. Lorien walked slowly, savoring every soundless note, every drift of scent, The air was thick with the fragrance of rain just before it falls, of clean earth after a storm, of morning light soaked into wild honeysuckle. He carried the key lightly, feeling it pulse with each heartbeat, guiding him forward. And as he walked, he began to notice, faintly at first, then more surely, that the path was not truly empty. Here and there, spaced like ancient milestones, stood doors. Each door was different, one shaped like a curling fern, another like the wing of a bird, yet another like the spiral of a seashell. All hovered just above the ground, untethered, and all shimmered faintly, as though made of spun cloud and memory. He stopped before the first door, tilting his head, considering. There was no handle, no lock, no hinge, only a smooth, waiting surface that seemed to lean toward him, expectant, patient. The key in his hand trembled once, twice, then fell still. This was not the door it wished to open. Smiling softly, Lorien continued onward, past the dreamlike gates, deeper into the garden that had no end, the key glowing faintly, a little star in the cradle of his palm. The path meandered onward, weaving through thickets of shimmering vines and arches of cloud blossoms that drooped low, brushing Lorien's hair like soft fingertips. The silence deepened, not heavy, not fearful, but tender, like the hush of snowfall, or the long breath before a song begins. Time itself seemed to stretch and slow. Hours might have passed, or moments, it mattered little. In this place, time had no sharp edges, no hurried hands. At last, he came upon another door, one unlike any he had seen before. It was vast, yet simple, a curve of silver mist pulled taut like silk. No pattern adorned it, no ancient spiral, no mark of bird or branch. It simply was, pure and waiting, like the surface of a still pond beneath a hidden moon. The key in Lorien's hand pulsed stronger now, a steady, warm thrum against his skin. It glowed brighter, casting a faint halo against the mist. Drawing a slow, deep breath, Lorien stepped forward. He lifted the key, touched it gently to the waiting surface, and felt the faintest shiver travel through the air, through the ground, through the breath of his own body. The door did not swing open, nor vanish, nor crumble. Instead, it softened, melted, like mist meeting morning sun, revealing a passage beyond, so filled with light that for a moment Lorien could only close his eyes. When he opened them again, he stood at the edge of a vast, floating lake. The water was not water, but liquid starlight, shimmering, rippling with slow, deep sighs. Tiny islands of mist drifted lazily across its surface, and in the air above, trails of silver birds flew in endless, winding dances. At the far side of the lake, half hidden in a crown of fog, he glimpsed another tree, taller, grander than the first, its branches heavy with glowing fruits, each one softly breathing in the twilight. Lorien felt the pull in his chest, soft, certain, and began walking along the narrow ribbon of cloud that arched over the lake's glassy surface. The bridge beneath his feet was so fine, so delicate, that it barely seemed real, a single tendril of mist, woven with threads of light, cradling his every step. Below, the lake of stars sighed and shimmered, casting slow, rippling reflections that shifted with every breath of unseen wind. Every now and then, a droplet of starlight would lift from the surface, hover weightless, and drift upward, vanishing into the endless sky like a dream forgotten upon waking. Lorien moved carefully, reverently, as if the air itself were listening, watching. His heart was steady, but full of a quiet wonder so vast it left no room for fear. As he walked, he began to hear something, a sound not heard by ears alone. It was a song, old and soft, woven from the hush of rain on leaves, the distant cry of an owl, the deep, slow turning of the world in its slumber. The song seemed to come from the great tree ahead, from its roots, from its branches, from the luminous fruits that hung heavy and low. At last, after a time that stretched thin and golden, Lorien reached the island. The mist parted before him, swirling away in slow spirals, and the tree welcomed him with a long, low creak, as though waking from a deep and gentle dream. At the base of the tree, nestled among the gnarled, glimmering roots, there stood a pedestal, and on it, a mirror. But it was no ordinary mirror. Its surface was not glass, but liquid, shimmering like the lake itself, yet darker, deeper, as if it held the night sky within it. And reflected in it, not Lorien's face, nor the garden, nor the mist, but something else. A door. A final door, waiting in the heart of the clouds, hidden even from the eyes of dreamers. Lorien stepped closer, his reflection blurring into the shifting silver, and knew that the journey was far from over, that the greatest mystery was still yet to be found. Lorien gazed into the mirror, the surface shifting, not quickly, not sharply, but like the slow circling of planets around a quiet star. Within its depths, the image of the door pulsed softly, sometimes clear, sometimes half-hidden beneath waves of silver. It was shaped like a spiral of air, as if it had been made by the wind itself, not built, not carved, but gathered, from dreams, from breath, from memory. And then, slowly, gently, as if waking from a long and gentle sleep, the mirror began to dissolve. It flowed downward, spilling silently into the roots of the great tree, vanishing like rain into earth, leaving behind only the image that had lived within it. The final door now stood before him, not far, but not near, not real, yet no longer imagined. It hovered just above the mist, framed in a soft light that came from nowhere, and everywhere. Lorien stepped toward it, the garden behind him holding its breath. With each footfall, the air grew warmer, fuller, as though he were stepping deeper into the heart of something, not a place, but a being, as though the clouds themselves were watching with kind and curious eyes. At the base of the final door lay no lock, no handle, only a single, empty hollow. Lorien looked to the key he had carried all this way, still pulsing gently in his palm. And as he knelt and placed the key into the waiting space, something in the air shifted, not a breeze, not a sound, but a stillness, deeper than silence, more complete than rest. The door began to open. It opened slowly, not with creak or groan, but with the softness of petals parting at dawn. The light that spilled from within was not bright, nor blinding, but rich, deep gold, streaked with violet and rose, like the last sliver of sunset caught inside a dream. Lorien stepped forward, and the door opened wider, revealing what lay beyond, and what lay beyond was not a room, nor a hall, nor even a sky. It was a memory. A memory so vast, so soft, so beautifully quiet that it wrapped itself around him like a blanket woven from all the lullabies ever sung. He saw the village, not as it was, but as it had once been, younger, softer, even higher in the sky. Sculptors worked with laughing hands, clouds danced in familiar shapes. Children wove dragons from fog, while elders shaped long staircases that reached toward nothing, and everything. He saw his own house, smaller, tucked beside a tree that no longer stood. He saw a woman there, gentle hands, moonlight hair, shaping a flower from cloud that bloomed only when kissed by the morning sun. His mother. And beside her, a man, tall, quiet, shaping nothing at all, simply watching the clouds as they passed. His father. The memory held no words, only warmth, the kind that lingers behind after a hug, or a whispered goodnight. Lorien stood within it, not as a visitor, but as one who belonged. And then, like mist rising with the sun, the memory faded, not vanished, but lifted, becoming part of the breath, the light, the air. He stepped through the last of the doorway's light, not away from the past, but forward, into its echo. Ahead, something shimmered, not another door, but a window. And in that window, something waited. Lorien stood in silence before the mirror, the soft wind tugging at his sleeves, the tree humming quietly behind him, its glowing fruits casting halos of sleepy light across the cloud beneath his feet. The door reflected in the mirror shimmered faintly, distant and blurred, as though seen through rippling water. It seemed not anchored in any place, not held by roots or stones, only suspended in a vast sea of mist and memory. He reached out, fingertips brushing the cool liquid surface. The mirror rippled once, twice, then stilled, and suddenly, Lorien was no longer standing on the cloud island. He was somewhere else. All around him stretched a soft nothingness, not darkness, not emptiness, but a pale, endless hush. The air here was still, warm, and full of the scent of dreams, not any one dream, but all dreams, blending together into something sacred. Before him stood the final door. It was small, almost shy, made not of wood or silver or mist, but of woven threads of memory, childhood laughter, a mother's song, the weightless feeling of swinging high beneath a summer sky. The door shimmered, pulsing gently like a heartbeat, and in its center, a small mark glowed, the same shape as the key Lorien had carried all this way. He did not need to reach for it. The key lifted on its own, drifting from his hand, dissolving softly into light as it touched the door. There was no sound. No flash. No great trembling. Only a quiet sigh, like the settling of snow. And the door, that final, secret door, slowly opened. Beyond the final door, there was no throne, no hidden treasure, no answer written in stars. There was only a room, small, round, and filled with clouds. But these clouds were unlike the others. They pulsed with colors Lorien could not name, soft, warm hues that stirred old feelings, half-forgotten dreams, pieces of thoughts from long ago. The air shimmered with a gentle hum, as though the room itself breathed in rhythm with the heart. In the center stood a low table, and upon it, something familiar. A sculpture. It was made entirely of cloud, held in perfect stillness, and as Lorien stepped closer, he realized it was one of his own. A small one, shaped long ago when he was just a child, sitting cross-legged on his stone bench by the cottage edge. A bird, not flying, not singing, but simply resting, its wings folded gently around itself, as if sleeping. He reached out, touched it gently. And in that moment, the mist around him shimmered, and the whole room seemed to exhale. He saw, not with his eyes, but with his heart, what this place truly was, a chamber of resting dreams. Not the great, soaring ones that changed the world, but the quiet, forgotten ones. The tender ones. The ones shaped in silence, left behind not because they lacked beauty, but because they asked for nothing in return. This was where the dreams of the sculptors came to sleep. Not vanish, not fade, but simply rest, forever held in the soft hands of time. And in this sacred place, Lorien understood. Sculpting clouds had never been about beauty alone. It had never been about wonder, or applause, or even the stories that danced across the sky. It had always been about listening, and remembering, and letting go. Lorien sat beside the sculpture for a long, unmeasured while. No ticking clock marked the time, only the slow breathing of the cloud chamber, and the hush that filled it like warm water in a bowl. He studied the tiny sleeping bird he had once shaped, not perfect, not grand, just quiet, and kind, and full of something simple, care. And around it, on shelves of floating cloud, he began to notice others, dozens, perhaps hundreds, of sculptures. Each one delicate, gentle, softly resting. Some were boats with curled sails, waiting in dreams to drift again. Some were cups filled with imagined tea. Some were trees, tiny, leafy, full of sighing shade. He felt, suddenly, as though he were not alone, as though every sculptor who had ever worked the cloud mist with wonder and tenderness had left a piece of themselves here. Not their greatest masterpiece, no, but their truest. This room was not a reward, nor a secret prize. It was a memory, cradled in cloud. And slowly, gently, without sound or ceremony, Lorien stood. There was no need to linger. The sculpture would stay, and its dream would be safe, held not by walls or locks, but by the simple act of being seen. The door opened once more, this time not to the lake, nor the mirror tree, nor the garden of spirals, but back to the staircase, back to the sky, back to the drifting world where mist kissed mountaintops. Lorien stepped through. And with each step downward, the world grew warmer, brighter, not louder, no, just more awake. When Lorien returned to the village, the sun was just beginning to dip beneath the horizon, washing the sky in long strokes of lavender, rose, and pale honey gold. The villagers were gathered at the Grand Plaza, as they often were at dusk, sending off their final sculptures for the day, a giraffe with spiral horns, a clock with floating numbers, a cloud shaped like a question mark that drifted away slowly, as if pondering its own purpose. Lorien said nothing. He needed no words. He took his place on the old stone bench, just as he always had, and folded his hands in his lap. His tools sat beside him, but he did not reach for them. He simply watched the clouds gather in the distance, soft and slow, and listened. One by one, the stars appeared. First the bold ones, then the shy. And high above, something shimmered briefly in the sky, a shape like a sleeping bird, drifting gently eastward, trailing silver mist behind it. No one else seemed to notice. But Lorien did. And he smiled. For he understood now that some clouds were not meant to be shaped, nor shown. Some dreams did not need to be spoken aloud. Some were simply meant to be held, quietly, gently, in the heart. And so the village grew quiet once more, wrapped in the hush of twilight, and the clouds gathered like old friends above the rooftops, ready for another day of becoming. And beneath them, the sculptors rested, not for answers, nor for praise, but simply for the joy of shaping wonder from the wind. And far below, the world turned slowly toward sleep. In the far north, beneath ribbons of skylight, an old carousel waits in the snow. It spins only for the quiet-hearted, and tonight, it spins for a girl named Aurora. Far, far in the north, where the snow falls not in storms, but in soft, drifting sighs, there lies a land that never fully wakes. Daylight there is pale and fleeting, like the flicker of a candle in a vast cathedral of white. But night, oh, night in that land, is long, tender, and filled with secrets. Nestled among the hills of silver frost and whispering pine, there is a clearing, round, untouched, and bathed in starlight. No path leads to it, yet those who are meant to find it, always do, though they may not remember how or when. And at the center of this clearing stands a carousel. Not the kind found in towns, nor in fairs, nor in places that echo with laughter. This carousel is older than memory, made not of wood or paint, but of ice, and snow, and the quiet music of time. Its platform is carved from crystal, so smooth it mirrors the sky. The poles are branches of frozen birch, silvered and spiraled, and the creatures that wait beneath its canopy, oh, they are not horses, not lions, not dragons. They are softer than that. A snow stag with stars in its antlers. A seal carved from moonlight, still dripping with shimmer. A bear, old and wide-eyed, whose fur is made of night itself. And above them, the carousel's canopy spins, not cloth, but light, woven from the colors of the aurora that dances, night after night, in slow, celestial loops across the sky. It only turns when the sky calls it. And only for those who carry silence in their hearts. There was once a girl named Aurora, quiet as snowfall, whose village sat far below the northern hills. She had eyes like dusk, deep, thoughtful, and a voice she seldom used, not out of fear, nor shyness, but because she listened more than she spoke. She spent her days wandering the frost fields, her boots leaving careful trails that crisscrossed with rabbit tracks and the brush marks of passing winds. The villagers often said she was cloud-minded, lost in dreams, but her grandmother would smile and say, "No, she's simply walking closer to the stars." One evening, as twilight bled softly into night, Aurora followed a trail she didn't remember choosing. The snow beneath her feet sparkled faintly, as if lit from below, and the air had the hush of something waiting. She walked, step by step, as the wind dropped into stillness. The pines leaned overhead, their boughs heavy with ancient frost, and the stars blinked above like watchful, old eyes. And then, without warning, yet without surprise, the trees opened. Before her lay the clearing. And in the center, bathed in quiet light, stood the carousel. It wasn't spinning. Not yet. It stood still, like a held breath. Aurora approached slowly, her gloved fingers brushing the frost-laced rails, the creatures watching her with unblinking gentleness. There was no music, only the sound of snow settling and the soft rustle of Aurora above, green, pink, and pale gold, dancing in waves. And then, with a creak like the stretch of a sleeping limb, the carousel began to move. The carousel turned slowly, not with the clatter of gears or the jingle of bells, but with the sound of snow falling, steady, soft, endlessly gentle. The platform glowed faintly beneath Aurora's boots, casting a silvery halo that shimmered across the ground like water touched by moonlight. As it moved, the creatures stirred. The snow stag lifted its head, antlers catching the aurora like branches dipped in stars. The seal blinked once, its wide eyes reflecting the swirl of colors overhead. The bear, vast and silent, gave a long, soundless yawn, its breath turning into a ribbon of mist that curled lazily in the air. Aurora stood at the edge, uncertain. There were no signs, no words, no instructions, only stillness, and the silent invitation of the turning ride. And yet, she understood. With slow steps, she approached the stag. Its shape was made not only of snow and ice, but of something softer, a memory, perhaps, or a promise. When she reached out, her hand did not feel cold fur, but a kind of warmth that pulsed softly beneath the surface, like the echo of a heartbeat. She climbed upon its back. The carousel turned. And with it, the sky. The moment her feet left the ground, the world shifted. The clearing, the forest, the hills, all faded into softness. The stars above stretched and spun, and the aurora bloomed brighter, reaching down in wide spirals to cradle the girl and her mount. The stag leapt, not in motion, but in feeling, and suddenly, they were gliding. Not through air, but through memory. And the journey had begun. At first, the world around Aurora was colorless mist, neither dark nor bright, but filled with gentle shadings, like the inside of a pearl. She held the stag's antlers lightly, though it needed no guiding. It moved on its own, sure-footed in the sky of dreams. Shapes began to form in the fog. A lantern swaying gently in a frost-bitten window, the kind her grandmother once lit with shaking hands before evening stories. A snow globe, cracked and forgotten, resting on a shelf that hadn't existed in years, swirling with flecks of frozen time. And then, a sound. Her mother's voice, humming not a song, but the end of one, the part that fades into silence just before sleep. The carousel was not carrying her through distance, but through remembrance. Through stillness. Through truth. The stag stepped lightly across invisible bridges, each one spanning some space inside her she hadn't known was there. On one side, a field she had played in as a child, golden beneath a too early autumn sun. On another, the scent of fresh bread rising, the kind that only ever appeared when someone had waited hours in quiet joy for it. And then, ahead, a door. Floating, suspended in the sky, made of frost and wood and quiet laughter. The stag paused before it, and Alira felt her breath catch, not from fear, but from something like reverence. She knew this door. Though it had never stood in her waking life, it belonged to her, the part of her that still remembered warmth, even after cold. And with one soft breath, the door began to open. The door opened not with creak or clang, but with the hush of fabric being folded, slow, soundless, and full of care. Beyond it lay a room suspended in the sky, lit not by lamps, but by the glow of thought and memory. It was her grandmother's room, not as it had truly been, but as her heart remembered it. The rocking chair, always facing the fire, still draped with the shawl woven from worn stories. The shelves, cluttered with jars of dried herbs, buttons in tiny tins, and books too old to be opened. The windows, blurred with frost, but glowing faintly with the lights of the northern sky. Alira stepped down from the stag, her boots making no sound upon the invisible floor. The air was warm, touched by the scent of mint and rose petals, of tea never poured but always waiting. She walked slowly to the chair, her fingers brushing the armrest, and for a moment, only a moment, the shape of her grandmother seemed to sit there again, eyes soft and knowing, hands folded with love. Not a ghost, no, not quite. Just an echo. A blessing. A part of the carousel's gentle gift. For this ride was not one of thrill or speed, but of return, to pieces of the self gently laid aside, forgotten, and now found again beneath the sky. Alira did not speak. But she smiled, the kind of smile that belongs only to the quietest moments, when all the world feels wrapped in velvet, and everything, even loss, is tender. Then, the door folded closed, and she climbed once more upon the snow stag's back. The carousel turned again, slow as a lullaby, and the sky beneath her shifted into a new dream. Now the colors of the aurora deepened, from pale greens and golds to richer hues of plum, of blue lavender, of deep rose. They rippled like silken ribbons pulled by unseen hands, twirling above the path of the carousel. This time, the stag leapt higher, not in speed, but in memory. The mist around them broke apart like veils being drawn back from forgotten windows. And there, beneath them, lay a frozen sea. Not threatening, not wild, but still, and luminous, like glass laid over a sleeping world. Great sheets of ice sparkled with silver light, and below them, shapes moved, slow, dreamlike creatures, seals and whales and soft-winged birds, gliding in silence. The stag descended, light as a breath, landing on a small drift of snow that floated like a cloud above the sea. There was no land in sight, only sky, ice, and the deep hush of everything holding its breath. Alira dismounted, and the air around her sang, not with voices, but with memory. Here, long ago, or perhaps just last winter, she had stood beside her father as he showed her how to listen for the cracking ice. "It speaks," he had said, "if you're quiet enough." And now, here again, the ice spoke, not with danger, but with kindness. A long, low sound, like a whale's song, echoing beneath her boots. She knelt, placing her hand against the frozen surface, and felt it pulse. Not like a heart, but like the earth itself exhaling, slow and ancient and true. She closed her eyes. For a moment, she was that child again, the one who believed the stars whispered their names to those who asked gently. When she opened her eyes, the stag was waiting, its breath steaming like a halo. And the carousel began to rise once more, lifting her, slowly, into the painted sky. The carousel turned gently through layers of sky that grew quieter, softer, thinner, not emptier, no, but full in a different way. Here, silence was not the absence of sound, but the presence of something vast, and kind, and still. Aurora sat upon the snow stag's back once more, her breath forming little stars before her lips. The wind around her was not cold, only cool enough to feel awake, to feel real, like the touch of a kind hand in a dream. Below her, the frozen sea had vanished. In its place now stretched a field, wide, endless, of tall white grasses that shimmered like silver threads beneath moonlight. They swayed with no wind, each stalk moving to a rhythm of its own, as though they too rode the unseen music of the night. And standing in the center of this field was a mirror. Not flat like glass, nor hard like ice, but a mirror made of light. Oval in shape, framed by frost-touched branches that never grew or died, only remained. It did not reflect her face, nor the stag, nor the sky. It reflected moments. Fleeting, fragile things. Her fingers trailing along a frost-kissed fence. The shadow of a kite against sunlit snow. A lost mitten, lying forgotten in spring grass. And then, something deeper. The moment she had chosen silence, long ago, when noise had grown too sharp and words too quick. Not from fear, but from a soft kind of knowing, that the quiet held treasures loudness could not find. She dismounted, stepped close to the mirror. The grasses parted, as if they too wished to see. And for one still heartbeat, she did not look at the mirror, but through it. And what she saw, was herself. Not the outer self, not the shape others named Aurora, not the girl wrapped in coats and snowlight, but the inward one. The soul self. The dreamer who wandered through stillness like a moth through candlelight. The mirror showed her holding the world not in her hands, but in her attention. She saw the way she watched snow fall, how she listened to rivers without needing to speak. She saw the small kindnesses she never mentioned, a scarf tucked into a friend's bag before a long walk, a trail cleared quietly for someone who might not know who had done it. She saw that silence was not absence. It was presence, at its most complete. Tears came, not of sadness, nor joy, but of something deeper. Recognition. The mirror, satisfied, shimmered once more, and slowly faded, dissolving into mist. The grasses returned, brushing gently at her legs, and the carousel waited. The stag turned its head toward her, eyes steady as stone polished by time. Aurora climbed onto its back again. And this time, the carousel did not rise. It sank. Not downward, not into darkness, but inward. Into a dream within a dream, a place softer even than memory, deeper than silence. Where there was no wind. No light. Only warmth. The kind found in the arms of someone who has waited all night, just to hold you when the dreaming is done. Down and inward the carousel glided, not through space, nor through time, but through softness, through something quieter than thought. The sky above, once alive with aurora, now faded into a velvet dark, studded with stars no larger than the glow of a moth's wing. And below, all was still. It was not night, not truly. Nor was it sleep. It was something between. Here, Aurora saw no landscape, no path. Only clouds, gentle, low, drifting slowly in long lines like lullabies made visible. The air was warmer now, wrapped in the scent of old parchment, honeyed milk, and the pale sweetness of distant flowers. The carousel slowed to a stop, hovering in that tender stillness. The creatures did not stir. Even the snow stag was motionless now, as if carved from thought. Aurora stepped down. There, just ahead, hung a single lantern, a globe of dim gold light, suspended by nothing, swaying as if moved by breath. Beneath it stood a figure, indistinct, yet familiar, neither old nor young, neither stranger nor known. She felt no fear. Only recognition. Not of a person, but of a part of herself, the part that waited behind every quiet moment, behind every breath she had ever held before a snowfall. The figure beckoned, not with motion, but with presence. And Aurora stepped forward. Not to speak. Not to ask. But to listen. The voice came not from the figure, but from the air around them, soft as fog on warm skin, delicate as the hush between pages turning. Aurora, it said. You have ridden the silence. She nodded, slowly. The air accepted her answer. You have seen what cannot be spoken. Heard what can only be known. You have touched your own stillness, and found it wide as sky. The voice paused, as if smiling. Now, return. The lantern flickered gently. Around her, the clouds shifted, not parting, not disappearing, but folding inward, becoming something else. The carousel beneath her rose again, the snow stag awakening with a slow blink, its antlers catching starlight once more. The sky returned, first as a whisper, then a breath, then a full chorus of green, rose, gold, the aurora alive again, spinning gently above like a crown woven of soft song. The ride had circled through silence, through memory, through self, and now it curved homeward, back toward waking, back toward still snowfields and the hush of pine. Aurora did not feel the carousel turn beneath her, she simply felt the shift, the way night turns slowly into morning, the way dreams begin to loosen their threads. Far below, the clearing waited, silent, silver, unchanged. The carousel slowed. Stopped. The snow stag bowed its head. And Aurora stepped down, her feet soft upon the snow. Aurora stood once more within the clearing. The carousel behind her gleamed faintly in the starlight, its creatures returning to stillness, their breath now slow, their eyes closed once more in waiting. The music, if it had ever truly played, faded into silence, leaving behind only the sound of snow falling in the distance, soft, rhythmic, like a lullaby without end. Above her, the aurora swayed in wide, quiet spirals. The colors, brighter now than before, seemed to nod in farewell, not in sadness, but in peace. A gentle parting, like the final wave from a friend who lives just beyond the dream. Aurora looked down at her gloved hands. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. The silence inside her felt wider now, warmer. Not empty, but filled with something she could not name. Something kind. Something waiting to be shared, not with words, but with presence. She turned once more toward the carousel. The snow stag stood just where she had first found it, unmoving, eternal. And still, though it made no sound, though it never looked, she felt it had said goodbye. And then, slowly, without any fanfare, Aurora began to walk. Not hurried. Not hesitant. But steady, and sure, and wrapped in a quiet that would follow her, always. The forest greeted her with silence, branches heavy with sleep, needles whispering above in soft, shivering tones. Her path home was not lit, not by lantern, not by moon, but somehow, her feet found the way. She passed no one. Spoke to no one. And yet, with every step, she felt accompanied by something that walked beside her not in form, but in feeling. As if the night itself had taken her hand and chosen to walk quietly at her side. When she reached her village, the windows were dark. Curtains drawn. Chimneys sleeping. She entered her small house, removed her boots, her coat, her scarf. Everything as it had been. And yet, when she placed her hand upon the windowsill and looked up into the sky, she saw the last ripple of green and gold dancing on the edge of dawn. And she smiled, not because she had taken a great journey, or learned some mighty secret, but because she had been reminded of something she already knew. That stillness is sacred. That silence is not the absence of meaning, but the home of it. And that somewhere, high above, beneath the ribbons of the northern sky, the carousel would spin again, not always, not often, but just enough, for those quiet hearts who listen, and wait, and believe. And with that final thought, Aurora slipped into sleep, the dream not ending, but simply continuing, behind her eyes, beneath the stars, forever turning. Deep in the winter mountains, a silent tailor stitches warmth from snowflakes. He sews not for people, but for the small and wandering, until one visitor changes everything. High among the tallest peaks, where clouds brush the earth like silk scarves drawn across sleepy shoulders, there lives a tailor. Not a tailor of cities, no, not one with buttons and bustling shops, nor one who measures time in coin and cloth. This tailor lives in a house carved into the mountainside, built of pale stone and held together by quiet. His name is Wren. Each morning, long before the sun lifts its golden eyelid over the ridges, Wren steps outside, barefoot in the snow, and listens. The wind brings him the whispers of winter creatures, tiny wishes, soft requests, murmured into the frost. A hare who's lost her warmth. A bear whose fur no longer feels quite like home. A bird who cannot remember the comfort of feathers. And Wren, silent as dawn, nods, and begins. He does not sew with thread. No needles, no cloth, no scissors. He stitches with snowflakes. Not the ones that vanish on skin, but the rare kind. The slow fallers. The ones born from the sighs of old clouds and the laughter of northern stars. Each flake is different, everyone knows this. But Wren knows something more. Each flake holds a mood, a memory, a moment in stillness. He collects them, gently, with a breath of steam and a gloved touch, and folds them into coats. Not for people. For creatures. He is the Snowflake Tailor. And he makes warmth, not with heat, but with care. Wren's workshop is round, and quiet, and full of breath. Not loud breath, no, the opposite, the kind of breath that fogs gently in winter morning light, the kind one takes before stepping outside into new snow. Icicles dangle from the ceiling like wind chimes that forgot how to sing. The walls are lined with drawers, hundreds, each marked not by name, but by symbol, a curled paw, a set of antlers, a feather falling, a swirl of sleep. Inside each drawer are snowflakes. Not loose, they would drift away, but resting within hollowed walnut shells, carefully gathered and sealed with soft wax. Wren knows each one. He opens them when the time is right. When a creature comes to him, weary from cold or from wandering, he does not ask them to explain. He watches, listens, then chooses. A flake for calm. A flake for memory. A flake for courage. A flake for sleep. Layer by layer, he places them on his table, a great, polished stone warmed only by touch, and begins to shape them into fabric. The flakes melt for no one, not even time. They stay, when chosen with care. And the coats he makes, ah, the coats, they are not beautiful in the way of human eyes. But to a fox, they feel like a mother's fur. To an owl, they feel like the moment before wind. To a mouse, they feel like the earth remembering spring. And Wren, who asks for nothing in return, watches them go, one by one, wrapped in quiet warmth. Until one night, long after the frost has deepened, there comes a knock on his door. And the wind that follows it is strange. Not cold. Not cruel. But curious. The knock came again, not loud, not sharp, but steady, like a single pine cone falling from a tree. Wren stood very still. Few ever knocked. Most creatures entered quietly, leaving only a trail of paw prints and a grateful look. The knocking ones were rare, and always strange. He opened the door. And standing there, shivering but upright, was a child. A human child. Her coat was far too thin for the mountain air, her boots worn down to threadbare soles, her cheeks bitten by wind, but her eyes were wide and steady, full of that bright stillness that lives between snowflakes. She said nothing. Wren said nothing in return. Only stepped aside, and let her in. She moved like someone in a dream, not fearful, not hurried, as if she had walked through so much silence, words had become unnecessary. Her footsteps left no sound, only little half-moons pressed into the snow-dusted floor. Wren closed the door behind her. And the wind, outside, gave a curious sigh. The child stood in the center of the round room, eyes slowly drifting over the shelves, the drawers, the soft coils of mist still lingering near the ceiling. She reached toward nothing, touched nothing. But she seemed to see everything. At last, her voice, when it came, was soft. Not for me, she said. For someone else. And Wren, who had never asked a question in his life, nodded once. Then turned toward his drawers. The drawer he opened bore no mark, no paw, no feather, no spiral of horn. It was the drawer he never opened, the one made from pale driftwood, sealed with a knot of frost ribbon in time. Inside, a single flake. Larger than any other. More delicate. More impossible. It was shaped like a spiral nest, layered and laced, and at its center, a tiny dot of blue light, pulsing so faintly it might have been imagined. Wren lifted it with both hands. The child watched without blinking. "She's lost," the child whispered. "She flew too far. Over the cliffs. The wind caught her." Wren did not ask who she was. Did not ask how the child had climbed the winter mountain. Did not ask why the snow did not cling to her boots, why her voice made the frost shimmer, why her breath left no cloud. Some questions do not belong in stories like this. He laid the flake upon the stone table, and with his gloved fingers, began. Layer upon layer. Circle upon circle. He chose from drawers marked with the tiniest symbols, a tear, wing, a half moon, a falling leaf. One flake at a time, he folded and pressed them into shape, humming nothing, saying less. And slowly, gently, a coat began to form. Not for a bear. Not for a fox. Not even for the child. But for something lighter than all of them. Something made of wind. Of wish. The coat took hours, or perhaps days, it was hard to know, for time in Wren's workshop drifted like smoke, uncounted and unhurried. The child never moved, not once. She watched the tailor work with the stillness of a lantern flame, small, steady, and sure. Outside, the mountain grew wider, quieter. The trees bowed deeper beneath the weight of new snow. And the wind that had once been sharp, now tiptoed against the walls, like it too was waiting. At last, Wren stepped back. The coat lay on the table. It was not made of fur, nor wool, nor feathers. It was made of shimmer. It was made of hush. It was made of snowflakes too rare to name, too soft to touch. It was the lightest thing he had ever made. If one were to hold it, they'd feel nothing. Only warmth. Only memory. Only the faint breath of someone they'd almost forgotten. The child stepped forward. "She's a moth," she whispered. "But not like others. Her wings are pale. And she hums when she flies. She sings the stars to sleep." Wren nodded. He had made coats for wolves and owls, for mountain hares and shy mice. But never for a star moth. Not until now. The child reached out her hand, not for the coat, but for something else. Something unseen. Something that drifted slowly from the shadows of the room. A flicker. A flickering. A small, pale moth, quivering as though made from the edge of a dream. Her wings were tattered. Her body dim. But her eyes, soft, round, blinking, were filled with starlight. The moth hovered unsteadily above the coat, her wings like whispers, thin, translucent, trembling with a tiredness that had no name. The child cupped her hands beneath the little creature, and ran, with a gentleness older than time, draped the snowflake coat across the moth's back. There was no flash, no shimmer, no grand change, only stillness. Then a breath. Then, warmth. The moth blinked once, twice, and began to hum. A note so low, so soft, it could only be felt inside the chest, not heard, not spoken. A hum that vibrated through the stone floor, through the icicles above, through the waiting sky. It was a song of comfort. A lullaby for the dark. A song the stars had missed. She hovered higher now, her wings catching the light from Wren's hearth, if such light existed, and scattering it in rings of pearl and frost. The coat glowed faintly around her shoulders, not bright, not bold, but like a memory held tight inside the heart. The child smiled, and with her smile, the snow outside slowed. The wind sighed once, long and low. And the moth, the star moth, began to rise. Not quickly. Not far. But upward, through the ceiling, or through some hidden seam in the world, into the soft, watching sky. The child turned. "It's time now," she said. Wren did not ask what for. He only opened the door. And let her go. Of wing. Wren stood in the doorway long after the child had vanished into the snow, or into something softer than snow. He watched the trail of her footsteps blur into nothing. Not fade, not melt, just become part of the white. And above, the sky breathed. Not with clouds, nor wind, nor falling snow, but with light. A faint flickering. A quiet glow. The star moth had risen. He could feel her wings trembling against the sky's dark fabric, leaving behind threads of soundless song. Wren stepped back inside and closed the door with care. He did not cry. But he sat, slowly, at the round table, where the last shimmers of the snowflake coat still lingered like dew on old petals. His hands, so skilled, so silent, lay folded in his lap. He did not move them. Outside, the wind had gone utterly still. The mountains listened. Somewhere far away, someone dreamed beneath a blanket of pale wool, unaware that the stars had changed their dance just slightly. And the moth? She was flying now. Soft as a wish never spoken. Wren closed his eyes. And slept, for the first time in many winters. When Wren awoke, it was night. The kind of night that only happens once a season, when every star is present, and even the moon forgets to shine too brightly. A velvet black sky, lit only by stillness and memory. The workshop was quiet. But in the very center of the room, upon the stone table, where the coat had rested, lay something new. Not a moth. Not a snowflake. Not even a scrap of fabric. But a seed. Round, pale, glowing faintly blue. Wren stared at it for a long while. It did not pulse. It did not hum. It simply was. He cupped it gently in his hands. Warm. And within it, though he could not see it, he felt the rhythm of tiny wings, curled and sleeping. Not the moth's wings. Something else. Something not yet born, not yet needed, but already dreaming. He did not place it in a drawer. He did not place it on a shelf. He placed it in a bowl of fresh snow, near the fire, and watched as the snow cradled it without melting. The wind picked up outside, just once, and then was still. And Wren whispered, for the first time in years, "When you're ready." The seed did not answer. But he knew it had heard. The days passed, slowly, gently, as they always did in Wren's high mountain home. The snow deepened in folds, like a sleeping blanket tucking itself tighter around the shoulders of the land. Pine branches bent gracefully under the weight, never snapping, only swaying, sighing. The creatures came and went, as they always had. A fox with a limp, who needed a coat of courage. A young raven, unsure of the sky, who left with a cloak of calm. Even a hedgehog, blinking sleepily too early from hibernation, was given a coat laced with lullabies. But always, Wren returned to the bowl of snow near the hearth. The seed remained. Unchanged, and yet not still. Sometimes it glowed faintly. Sometimes it dimmed. Once, he thought he saw a flicker of a wing inside it, but only for a breath, then it was gone. He did not rush it. He gave it warmth. He whispered to it sometimes, in the hush between visitors. Small things. Not instructions. Not hopes. Just presence. And in those silences, the seed listened. On the coldest night of the long, long winter, when even the icicles dared not crack, and the stars burned closer than ever, Wren woke before dawn, stirred by something he could not name. A sound, perhaps. Or the lack of it. He rose, lit no lamp, and walked barefoot to the hearth. The snow in the bowl shimmered like moonlight held in still water. The seed, now open. Not broken. Not split. Just, unfolded. And inside it, nestled as if in a nest of snowflakes, was a being no larger than his palm. It was not quite a moth. Not quite a bird. Its wings were gossamer, dappled with constellations that shifted as it breathed. Its eyes were shut, its breath so faint he had to lean close to be sure it lived. But it did. And around its tiny form, strands of the snowflake coat still lingered, barely there, like the memory of a song hummed in childhood. Wren said nothing. He only gathered the snow around the creature a little higher, a little closer. Then wrapped a single scarf, woven from frost hair and wind thread, around the bowl, and waited. The wind stirred once at the window. Then again. And then. The wings moved. The wings moved again, slow at first, like someone stretching after a very long sleep. A shimmer passed along their edges, like a ripple of starlight skating across water. The creature stirred, blinking once, twice, 3 times, its eyes wide and soft and filled with something older than fear, something like wonder. It rose, not in a flurry, not in a rush, but with the care of one who knows how fragile the sky can be. The snowflake coat, though weightless, clung to its back, forming shapes as it moved, wings within wings, feathers within light. Each flake had settled where it belonged. Not because Wren had placed them perfectly, but because they had chosen. The creature hovered, then turned toward Wren. And in that moment, he understood, not in words, nor visions, but in stillness. This being had not come to be kept, nor even to be warned. It had come to carry something onward. A kindness. A memory. A silence wrapped in care. The creature hovered once more, then, with a blink like a curtain closing, vanished into the folds of morning light seeping in through the windows. And with it, something else left. A hush. A sorrow. A weight. Wren stood for a long while, his hands resting on the bowl of snow, now empty. Then, with the faintest smile, he began to sweep the floor. There would be more flakes to gather soon. Winter softened, as it always did. Not in a hurry, never, but gently, like sleep fading into waking. The snow grew thinner upon the trees. The wind, though still cold, carried sense of newness, of melted ice, of far-off streams beginning to sing again. The creatures came less often, but Wren did not mind. He sat more now, on the bench outside his door, a blanket of moss-woven wool across his knees, a quiet cup of something warm in his hands. He still gathered snowflakes, still listened to the wind. But something inside him had shifted. Not broken. Not changed. Just loosened. Like a knot untying. On rare nights, when the stars shone very close and the wind curled around the stones just so, he would hear it, faint, but certain. The song of wings made from sky and hush, moving far above the tallest peaks. And once, just once, he looked up to see it, a streak of frostlight, arcing across the stars, trailing threads of silence in its wake. The snowflake coat, carried still. Wren bowed his head, and whispered. Warmth goes where it's needed. And the wind, as always, listened. And the mountain, as always, held its breath. And slept.